Hey friends, so 2 weeks ago I made a Q&A announcement to coincide with reaching 100,000 subscribers, and y'all, well, you definitely delivered with some amazing questions, which I am now here to answer. If I could be any animal, what animal would I be? And what are my thoughts on the future of the poi spinning and flow arts community? The answers to these questions and more coming up in this video. Drex here from DrexFactor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain. And today I am diving into your questions in honor of making it to 100,000 subscribers here on YouTube. But before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Darkbunk, Fire Mecca, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterror Light Toys, Spin Balls, and Ultra Poi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all these awesome companies and the work they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links down in the description of this video. And special thanks to the non-business friend of the channel, Pekha Pekkonen. Thank you so much for supporting my channel, my work, and my mission. So first up, yes, it's time to flex. Check this bad boy out, my silver play button. This is kind of a fun thing to have. It's kind of both heavier and lighter than I was expecting. These are apparently all handmade, and so there are some interesting little artifacts along the edge where it's been carved out, but probably the thing that I think is coolest about it is the button itself is polished down to being a mirror, so you can see a reflection of yourself every time you look at it, because in case you didn't have a big enough ego from reaching 100,000 subscribers, just, you know, make sure you can see yourself every time you look at your plaque too. I got asked a lot of questions, so many in fact that this video would have been more than an hour long if I had answered each and every one. So I did my best to select those that I thought would have the most interesting answers, and also to select individual questions that have been asked by multiple people and prioritize them in the queue. And if I don't answer your question in this video, I will do my best to go back and answer your original comment. So let's go ahead and dive in. Milip Tychelfamus asks, any plans for a new chair? What's wrong with my chair? PewDiePie 10 Whistle asks, what's one thing that gets said all the time about poi spinning that you find a little bit annoying? In all honesty, if I hear one more person making a joke about us playing with our balls, I am going to roll my eyes yet again. But yeah, that's the one that always drives me a little nuts. Jessica Lipscomb 9117 asks, are you still learning tricks, or are you at the point where you know all the tricks or learn new ones instantly? I do not know all the tricks. I will never know all the tricks. No human being possibly can, and that's okay, because we're still always in the process of discovering new ones. What I got over the years was just kind of an acceptance that that's the way of things, and looking at it less in terms of having to learn all of the things and more in terms of thinking, well, what are the things to learn that are going to be a good complement to my style and are going to uphold my approach to flow? Lovery Otber asks, if you could be any animal, which one would you be? So you didn't specify extinct or living here, and I'm not exactly sure how I should read that into the premise of the question, because there are some extinct animals that I think are just fascinating. If we're talking extinct animals, I would love to be my favorite one, Deinonychus, a dromaeosaurid maniraptoran from the early Cretaceous of Montana. If we're talking about a living animal, I think I'd be split between being a gorilla, just because I think they're really cool, and being a wolf, which has come up multiple times in my life that my inner nature is very wolf-like, so take from that what you will. So Justin Weismer Media 8603 asked me a bunch of questions. I've selected just a few here, but I'm going to go through them one by one. Where are you based these days? Around the Northeast US near DC? Yes, I am in Tacoma Park, Maryland. It is a suburb of Washington, DC that is just on the outside of the northeast edge of the Washington, DC diamond. What are the top 5 best or most common poi moves for a beginner to learn? I made a video on that topic, a couple of them in fact. But I do believe that my thinking has changed somewhat on that topic since I made those videos. So off the top of my head, I think that the poi tricks that people should start with are things like extensions and extendulums, that is the type of pendulums where you go around in big circles with your arms. In addition, I would put butterflies on that list. I would also put pendulums as a transition tool on that list, simply because I don't think that there's a style of poi that doesn't benefit from starting with pendulums as your primary transition tool from the start. You can learn stalls a little bit later. For the final trick of those beginner 5, I would say that I would make it reels, and specifically performing reels in such a way that you learn how to do chané steps with them so you can explore the space around you a little bit. Which one of your beginner series is the best for a new poi spinner to learn? Is it your COVID series? Are you planning to do another beginner series in the near future? Funny you should ask this question. If we're talking purely about lessons that are available without a paywall, then yes, my COVID series is the best one that I currently have out there. If we expand our search to resources that are behind a paywall, I would actually say go back and check out the live stream lessons that I started on Crowdcast. I want to say like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. That was my second attempt to go through the material from the COVID series, which was material that I had been working on for years as a new beginner series. And I'm pretty happy with how it went in the live stream lessons. You can go back and watch recorded versions of them, by the way. I'll link to that down below. But I'm at a point where I think I feel safe creating a new beginner series around that material. So hopefully that's coming before the end of the year. I think I can. How does traditional LED poi compare to fire poi? Is it mostly the same, or are there any significant variations in what should be switched in the style? I would say that there are very significant differences. Chief among them is the fact that with most LED poi, if you're in the dark, you cannot see the performer. With fire poi, even if you're in the dark, you can see the performer. So with LED poi, you tend to work more with tricks that create great patterns in their trails. Truth be told, if you want to see some of the best LED poi spinning in action, look to glow stringers, because that is really the art that they've cultivated over the years. They create a lot of spirals. They keep everything in wall plane in front of them. You add some flowers on top of that and you're good to go. With fire poi, ironically enough, you have kind of the opposite requirements in that you kind of want to avoid having them come a little bit too close to your body. So unless you have protection, wraps are out. But with fire poi, doing more 3D stuff becomes tenable once again. So things like body tracers and plane breaks and things like that really do show up well with fire. This is actually a great topic for a video in general. If y'all would like to get my recommendations on stylistically how to write routines that work best for each medium, leave me a comment and let me know. What's your preference for music when spinning poi? It changes by the week, if not sometimes the day, but by and large, I like rock music, I like pop music, I like some hip hop. The only genre I really kind of steer away from is EDM. So like the past few weeks, I've been practicing a lot listening to top 40 music, and I've actually been finding that a lot of what's in the top 40 charts right now is a great fit for a lot of my poi dance warm-ups. If you're asking about what earworm is in my head right now and that I am listening to nearly constantly when I just need something to fill the space, that song would be Blame It On Your Love by Charlie XCX featuring Lizzo. Cannot get enough of that one. How do you come up with new routines and choreographies? This is a great question, and the answer really depends upon the specific piece of choreography that I'm putting together. Sometimes I will see a combination of moves in my head and be curious, hey, can I actually do that in real life? And I'll work through it, and sometimes I'll find that I can't, but there's something else that's similar that I still like. A lot of the time, though, it starts with the music. Like, I'll be on Instagram seeing what music is trending, or something will pop up in my Apple Music suggested feed. And as I'm listening to that song, I will just see movement in my head. I really look for the musicality in putting together choreography. So, you know, if a song has got a particular beat, I start seeing footwork in my head that goes with that beat. If there's a really cool melody line, I'll see different poi tricks that go with that. Generally speaking, I start with what I see in my head and see how closely I can do that in reality. And in a lot of cases, I'll also find that as I'm working through a piece of music, I'll just see what feels natural in my body to do at different points. The big kind of editing process in this, though, is to shoot video of it and see how much what feels right matches up with the feel of the music. How do you handle injuries or setbacks in your poi practice? I mean, I'm in my 40s now, so it takes a long time to recover from injuries. They've been happening less frequently, though, and I think that that's because I started getting into the habit of stretching every other day. So because that's a part of my regular routine now, I actually don't remember the last time I got injured. So I would recommend that to everybody out there regardless of age. What equipment do you use for filming your videos, and do you have any tips for creating quality poi content? All right, so first and foremost, equipment. I am shooting this on a Sony a6500. I've got a Carl Zeiss lens on there. I believe it's a 24 millimeter, goes to f1.8. I've got two aperture LED panels, one that is giving me this Rembrandt lighting and the other one that is mounted back behind that room divider to give me the negative space around my head. Love it, love all the lighting. As for the question of tips for creating quality content, so here's my biggest piece of advice here. The equipment that you're using, by and large, does not matter. What matters is the quality of the content, the story that you're telling, the information that you're getting across, and how you get across it. I'm actually a firm believer in telling people to start with terrible equipment and figuring out how to become a good content creator as a result of it before they upgrade to better equipment. Why? Because by the time they've made that investment, they are already good enough at creating content that they're going to see a massive change in engagement as a result of it. If you go for the equipment first, you're going to spend a whole bunch of money on stuff that you're not going to know how to use, and the quality of the content that comes out of it is not going to be very good. The biggest question anybody should ask before they even start to shoot a single second or write a single sentence of any content is, why does this content need to exist? What does my audience get out of this piece of content? Is this something to inspire them? Is this something that they're going to learn from? Does this answer a question that they have? If you cannot answer that question, then don't create the content straight up, because if you are not serving your audience, then they're not going to interact with your content at all. What are your long-term goals for your poi practice and YouTube channel? Asking the big questions here. So I will give you some specifics and I will give you some generalities. Some specifics, I would really like to be doing more work with poi dance. Specifically, I would like to have in-person classes again. I would like to be doing workshop tours again, because I think that's how I want to interact with people out in the world, face-to-face. Longer term, I would really love to put together a stage show of my poi dance work. At this point, there's a big enough volume of it that I think that that would be a fun challenge, and also I have some things to pull from on that. More generally, what all of that says to me is that I want bigger challenges to throw my artistic muscles at. And specifically, I really want to show the potential of what poi dance can offer the world in terms of being an expressive art instead of kind of being the action sport or skill toy that we've traditionally looked at it as. Can you recommend any books, tutorials, or resources for poi spinners? Yes, I can, although whether they can get access to them is another question entirely. So the book I would recommend to poi spinners would be The Rhythm and Life of Poi by Ngamani Wata. I'm dead sure I'm not pronouncing that right, but I'm trying. It is a book by a Maori Poi elder about not just how Maori Poi is performed and built and spun, but also about kind of the history of Maori legend and culture that goes into Poi performance. That failing, there's a wonderful paper by Karyn Paringatai that is a history of Poi going back to the settling of the Polynesian islands, I think even before the settling of Aotearoa, New Zealand, that traces the origins of Poi from a juggling game to the modern part of kapahaka that we know it as, and how it has been influenced by colonization and tourism, and also too just by changes in Polynesian and Maori culture over the centuries. It's a fantastic read. Right now, that is kind of my Bible for how I think about the history of Poi before it became the social media phenomenon that it is now. I'll link to it down in the description. Highly recommended. Sky Guy's Quest asks, can you please bring back the double staff content? So short answer is maybe. So YouTube has changed a lot since I was making double staff content. And one of the ways it has changed is that it is very, very risk averse in terms of how the algorithm works. So believe it or not, if I were to bring back double staff content, the smartest way for me to do that would actually be to start up a second channel centered around just double staff content and leave this one focused on Poi. I already have a lot of work on my plate. I'm not sure I want to do that, but maybe if there's enough demand, who knows? Broskadile asks, I'm not sure if you've heard of Rose Thorn Bud, but I'd love to hear yours for your own flow as well as the flow community in general. What is one thing you are happy with, one thing you are struggling with, and one thing you are excited for? I love this exercise. This is fun. So with my own flow, one thing that I am happy with is the musicality that I'm seeing coming out of my Poi dance. Just in general, as a content creator, I struggle with the fact that I have to wear so many hats at the same time. Like, I'll spend an entire day shooting video and I'm glad that I got it done, but then I'll come out of it so exhausted and I've got to go back and edit all of it. And I wish I had somebody whose job it was to do that editing, but the problem is I just don't make enough money doing this to be able to pay somebody else to do it. So I have to wear too many hats right now, and I wish that I didn't. One thing that I'm excited for is that I've started work on a new Poi dance piece to a full-length song rather than just doing a 30-second snippet for Instagram. I'm actually going to choreograph the full song, and I'm enjoying how that's going thus far, and I can't wait to see what the results eventually are. And as for the flow community, I think one thing that I'm happy with in the flow community is that we more or less survived the pandemic. We survived a period in which everybody was kind of locked down and unable to interact with people in a meaningful way in person. And that made it very difficult for a lot of elements traditionally part of the flow arts to be able to continue and thrive. There are many things I think we're struggling with in the flow arts community, some of which are going to come up in a later question in this Q&A. But I think one of the biggest is just trying to figure out what our identity is right now, because I think that we've had a couple different competing ideas for what that is, partially as a result of the pandemic and partially as a result of some forces, economic and cultural, that were having an impact on us even before that. I think the thing that I'm most excited for in the flow community is just the increasing number of people that I'm seeing in it that embrace dance as an aspect of their flow. It used to be that it was like Ty Rochford and Zu Shutova and me, and that was basically it. But just in the past few months alone, I can think of at least a dozen new Poi dancers that I have seen out there, including some that have come about as a result of taking my classes or tuning into my videos. And that makes me feel really good and really excited for what comes next. Justin Blanchard 1470 asks, love the return to traditional Poi videos. Any thoughts on embarking further down that rabbit hole and or traveling to New Zealand? I would love to travel to New Zealand. I would love to travel to New Zealand. Challenge is, I don't make a whole lot of money, so a trip to New Zealand is probably out of my reach for the immediate and maybe middle future as well. That's probably a thing that I could fundraise for, but I feel guilty asking people to give me money to essentially go on what's a vacation. But who knows? Maybe I'm being too self-conscious about it. So y'all can let me know down in the comments. Would you give to a GoFundMe to send Drex to New Zealand and come back with loads of content around Maori poi spinning, or Maori poi? What am I talking about? Let me know down in the comments. Staff 936 asks, how did you go on the journey from discovering poi to continue to push to the highest levels of poi? I know my own journey is filled with bright lights followed by pitch black in terms of where to go next, so curious what yours was like. And what are your Myers-Briggs letters? So for those who don't know, I first saw Fire Poi at Burning Man 2006, which was also my first Burning Man, and was specifically seeing poi spinners in conclave that inspired me to want to pick it up myself. So when I got back from Burning Man, I spent months asking around to my friends being like, hey, what's that fire thing that we saw out at Burning Man, and do we know anybody who can teach me how to do that? So they said, yeah, our friend Paul knows how to spin poi. So looked up my friend Paul and I asked him if he would teach me. I went and had my first lesson with him and I was an absolute failure at it. And so I actually gave up. I decided that poi was not for me and I went on my merry way, and that would have been the end of the story were it not for my roommate who came back from a holiday in Thailand with a set of fire poi that he'd bought at a street market there for me. And he presented them to me proudly and said, hey, you wanted to learn how to do this, right? And I felt guilty about letting him down, so I picked them up and gave it a second try, and I haven't looked back since. But some important things in particular were, number one, very early on, I read a book called Mastery by a guy named George Leonard. I'll link to it down in the description. That essentially suggested to me that there was a way to master a skill that involved making the commitment to show up to keep on working on it every single day and work through the plateaus. Learn to love the plateau, he said, which was radically different from how I was learning any other skill at the time. And because poi was the thing that I had just picked up, I decided, okay, I'm going to apply this philosophy to poi and see how it goes. So I made a commitment to show up and practice it every day and keep on working on it even on the days when I didn't feel motivated to do so. And wouldn't you know it, the advice worked. As for my Myers-Briggs letters, and yes, I have a healthy degree of skepticism about this, as many people do, but the last time I took the test, I was an XNFP. That is, I was right on the dividing line between introvert and extrovert, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving. So take from that what you will. Me01010001000 asks, what are your thoughts on pseudoscientific ideas floating in and through the flow community? You mentioned that gatekeeping has been a pervasive problem in every flow art. Do you think that that is still the case? What recommendations do you have for a budding flow artist wanting to build their own brand? Outside of poi, what other things are you passionate about? Okay, so a lot of questions. Let me tackle the first one because this actually is something that multiple people did ask. And this one kind of came as a surprise to me because I, up until recently, never really thought of the flow community as being associated with pseudoscientific ideas, but I see what people are getting at now. I definitely had a problem in the pandemic of people getting on my case about being open about the fact that I was getting vaccinated and regularly using a mask. So when people come into the flow arts, and most specifically when they come in via the fire arts and elements of like the transformational festival community and things like that, I think inherently there is an aspect of that that is a reaction to modernity and some anxieties about modernity, and wanting to reconnect to a version of the past, or at least a version of the past that people believe once existed. And because of that, it makes certain segments of the community more likely to reject elements of modernity that include things like the scientific method and recommendations from scientists, because since they're in a place where they want to trust their own intuition over all of these things in the modern world, they're already kind of primed to go there. So, of course, the next and obvious question is, what exactly do we do about this? Because there are many ways in which it definitely hurts the community. And I don't have a very satisfying answer to that. Most of the resources that I've looked at when it comes to how exactly we can change people's minds basically come down to the fact that you kind of have to give them space to hold their beliefs and come to a point where they can question them by themselves. Because when people's beliefs are challenged, and even if you like throw facts at them, people will not change their minds, because you're literally doing a thing to them where they've developed a community identity around it. And so asking them to change their mind in many respects is also asking them to throw away their group of friends and be alone and isolated, and nobody wants to do this. And it's really difficult, it's really time and resource intensive. And unfortunately, from what I can tell from the research, there's really not a way around it. Which is not to say, by the way, that we just need to accept pseudoscientific nonsense and let that be how things are going to be. But I do think that when we march into it ready for battle, what we wind up with is battle. And that tends not to be super helpful in the long term. And believe you me, I've got so much more to say about this topic, but I want to keep this video short. So if you'd like to see a video essay on this topic, leave me a comment and let me know. Do I think that gatekeeping is still a problem in the flow arts? Yes and no. I think that there are ways that gatekeeping is applied in our community that is harmful to the community, and I think that there are ways that gatekeeping is not applied in our community that is also harmful to it. So there is absolutely a lot more that we can be doing to be welcoming to new people, and also to support people who come into this community so that they stay in the community longer. And at the same time, I think that there are some very specific cases where it's okay for us to say, you know, you need to put a certain amount of work into your craft before you qualify for things like teaching slots at festivals or professional gigs. I don't think that it's appropriate for people to just march in and be able to do that after they have only spent a few weeks or a few months learning their craft. I think that those are positions that should be open to people who've made a choice to commit themselves to them, rather than things that exist to make people feel seen. As for flow artists wanting to build their own brand, I would say, number one, look at people whose brands you admire and try and pick out what is it about those brands that you find appealing. Number two, just get out there and start making content. See what works, see what doesn't. It will teach you more to try a bunch of things and find out what doesn't work than you'll ever be able to by sitting down and outlining the thing. And finally, I think that it helps to spend some time really thinking about what are the values that I really want to bring to the world? What are the things that are most important to me to see out in the world, and the things that I would most like to inspire in other people? See if you can write out 3 to 5 specific driving qualities for you, and it's a pretty good bet that those then will be integral elements of your brand. And as for things outside of Poi that I love, goodness, that's a long list. I'm trained as a historian, so I still love history. I love paleontology. Living in DC is amazing for that because all the museums here are incredible. I love puzzles. I love comic books. I love movies. I love TV shows. I love music. I love classic rock specifically. There's a lot of things that I love. I love playing music. If I listed them all off, we'd be here all day. Economics, behavioral psychology, art history, media criticism. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Ever tried a prop and immediately knew it is not for you? And why is it not for you? So this is also going to overlap with another question a lot of people asked me, which was to share some stories from my history in the flow arts. And this one in particular has to do with puppy hammer, because puppy hammer was invented by a close friend of mine, Charlie Cushing. So there was a point several years ago at Wildfire in which Charlie really badly wanted me to take up puppy hammer, and I, by the same token, was having a great time with contact poi, and I noticed that you couldn't do contact poi with puppy hammer because the two ends are stuck together. So we agreed that for an hour we would exchange props. I would work with his puppy hammer and he would work with my contact poi. And we both came back after that hour and said, no, this is not for me. There's a lot of puppy hammer technique that kind of, it isn't just meteor technique, but also almost like contact staff. And contact staff is without a doubt the least intuitive tool to me. It feels so incredibly difficult and I cannot wrap my head around it. If a certain trick doesn't work on a day, what do? Drill until it works, or stop and try it a few days later. My technique for learning poi tricks is generally to break them up into component pieces and drill those. Specifically, when I do that, I'm doing it from one of two positions. Either I'm going for reps of a particular drill, or I set a timer for them, say like 10, 20, 30 minutes, and when the timer goes off, then I'm done doing that exercise for the day. I don't really subscribe to the idea that if something's not working, that you put it down, you come back to it days later. If for no other reason, then I believe that is a recipe for learning a thing that you're never completely in conscious control of. You have to go through those phases of learning the trick wherein things are not working and figuring out how to fix them nonetheless, rather than coming back and having all the pieces come together. Because if you don't know how the pieces came together, then you won't know how to fix it when something goes wrong again. What branch of science is your favorite and why? Any favorite philosopher? I think I'm going to say paleontology here. I love dinosaurs. I regularly read up on the latest research that's coming out around dinosaurs, so I think dinosaurs and paleontology would have to be it. As for my favorite philosopher, probably Ralph Waldo Emerson. I read on The Duty of Self-Reliance when I was in high school, and it really changed my world in a lot of ways. There's probably another philosopher that I'm more philosophically in line with, but Emerson was really the guy that rocked my world the hardest, the earliest, so I'm going to go with him. And that was it, friends. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And just to put this out there too, it feels great being at 100,000 subscribers, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everybody who helped me get to that point, all the people who have tuned in and supported my channel over the years, all of the companies and people that have been there, that have made it possible for me to continue working and continue creating content for the now more than decade and a half of my career. I would not be here without you, so from the depths of my heart, thank you so very much. And speaking of support, I have to throw a shout out there to my Patreon supporters. And in particular, I'd love to give a shout out to my fellow patrons who are listed on screen right now. Thank you one and all for supporting my channel, my work, and my mission. And just as like a personal note, those of you out there that are watching right now, if you're not currently a supporter, I would really appreciate it if you would sign up to become one. And here's why. Creating content is my passion. This is how I make an impact in the world and reach people that I never would be able to in person. And what makes that possible is the support that I get on Patreon. And that support has kind of tapered off a little in the past year, which is something that a lot of creators have been encountering in that time. And because of that, I've had to shift focus over to other things that bring in money, like teaching private lessons and teaching my live stream classes. And the thing is, there's only a certain number of hours in the week, so every hour that I spend teaching private lessons is an hour that's taken away from producing content. And so the results of that are things like I no longer upload as much content that has closed captions on it, for example, which is something that I would like to do more of. But when push comes to shove, if I've got the choice between being able to pay rent on time and doing the closed captions with an hour that I have on a Wednesday, I have to choose the thing that brings grocery money in the door. So if you would like to see me be able to go back to captioning my videos regularly and being able to spend more time creating scripted videos, so many of you out there have been saying you've been really loving the video essays. I would love to make more of those, but they take an enormous amount of time and energy to produce, and I can only do that when I have things like Patreon supporting me and making it possible to do those things instead of having to go seek out other work on the side. So if you want to see more of that stuff, stuff, because I know I do, please go and sign up for my Patreon over at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. There's a whole host of amazing rewards that are available there, but really any amount of support helps. Help me keep this channel alive for the next 100,000 subscribers and hopefully be able to create better content for them too. So go check that out, please, and thank you. Awesome. So I feel really grateful to be here. I feel really grateful for all of you out there that are watching. And I can't wait to see what the next few years bring as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to everybody who sent in their questions. I will see you all in the new video real soon, and I'm excited for the next chapter. Take care now. Peace.